The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, he'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
The South Kesteven series is sponsored by Gainsborough Cycles 01427 617 752. For all your cycling needs, this is your one-stop shop located at 20 Ropery Road, Gainsborough, or online at gainsboroughcycles.com. There's a link in the description. Gainsborough Cycles, ask for Trevor Halstead. Welcome back to South Kesteven again, everybody. Now, they like their villages beginning with the letter S down here. We saw Swayfield yesterday. Here's another one which is just to the east of Swayfield. This is Swinstead. Swinstead, Pig Homestead. Next up in South Kesteven, it's another tiny village which begins with the letter S. This time we find ourselves in Swinstead, about 5 miles west of Bourne. With around 100 households, Swinstead is a linear village stretching for just over half a mile from end to end. This place should not be confused with Swineshead, located some 25 miles away elsewhere in Lincolnshire. The two have been mixed up before, and by some pretty big names. None other than the famous bard himself, William Shakespeare, got the two mixed up when he wrote King John. In his work, John stayed at Swinstead Abbey, but the place Shakespeare was referring to was Swineshead Abbey. There is no abbey here in Swinstead. There is, however, a church dedicated to St Mary. The former England international footballer Beaumont Jarrett was its vicar between 1883 and 1895. Now, not many places can lay claim to a fact like that. At the centre of the village is a cross, a fine example of the type that would have dotted the landscape in medieval villages like Swinstead back in the 1400s. There are 2 halls here, and there's also a pub, namely the Windmill Inn. Technically, there's another pub if you want to include the Pigeon Loft, but that's a type of drinking establishment which differs from the traditional. We'll explore why as we take what is a pretty short walk here through Swinstead village. There genuinely isn't a lot to this one, but I guess sometimes less is more. Let's go walking and try and prove that theory as best we can. This is Swinstead. It's a lovely village filled with old stone cottages and was very important to the Dukes of Ancaster. This village is where they lived for a while when they weren't otherwise at Grimsthorpe Castle instead. Swinstead's connection to the Grimsthorpe estate should not be overlooked, and we'll see why near the end of this video. After having a short amble from my parking spot at the western end of Swinstead, I began with the cross in the centre of the village. Simply known as the Swinstead Cross, this is medieval and it's believed to be stood in, or close to, its original position. The junction it sits at is that of High Street and Cretan Road. It's not a market cross. Swinstead is far too small to have ever had one of those. With its step base, this instead has been used as a public monument since medieval times. Generally it's in good condition and has survived largely intact due to limited development in the surrounding area. Date-wise, the history nerds reckon it's 15th century. Not a lot more is really known about this one. With the church, however, it's a different story. This is St Mary's, which contains quite a few monuments to members of the Ancaster family from Grimsthorpe Castle. The most notable of them is the one to the last Duke, dated 1809. The church is made of stone and has lead and slate roofs. There was no mention of a church here at the time of the Domesday Book. The earliest parts of the structure we see today date from around 1200. It features a 13th century 2-stage tower with an embattled parapet and pinnacles and a 14th century north aisle. It also has early English and decorated features too. The nave is short with just a single 4-light window. The clerestory has a steeply pitched roof, and that's unusual because you can't actually see the windows. They are instead hidden behind the nave. There's a vault with a boiler house dating from 1789 which joins onto the eastern end of the nave, which extends part-way across the chancel, making for an unusual, quirky exterior. 4 bells hang here. They're all of interest. The first was cast locally by Thomas Norris of the Stamford Bell Foundry in 1628. The second is also from Stamford, but instead was cast by Alexander Rigby, who took over from Norris in 1699. The third is by William Noon, who worked out of Nottingham, and the fourth is the oldest, cast in Leicester in 1590. Capacity-wise, you can fit 250 people in this building. That was more than the entire population of the village at the 2011 census. Well, it might be a little bit cold right now, but it's a beautiful day today, it really is. And there's not a cloud in that sky. Beautiful blue sky to give Swinstead a fantastic backdrop. Awesome. Let's continue. There's not much left to show you really in this village, to be honest with you, because it's so small. But I found a few things that you might find interesting. There's an old pub or beer house, which is kind of next. And then we're going to talk a bit about Swinstead House and something called the Summer House as well. It's quite a complicated thing, so hopefully you can understand me. Back on the main street, next up we've got the former Windmill Inn. This is a Grade 2 listed pub with a history that dates back to the 17th century. It's built from coursed limestone rubble with ashlar dressings and coins, and has pantar roofs with crested ridge tiles. There may have been an alehouse on this site for many years before the 17th century, but nobody knows for sure. The inn was extended in the 18th century and again in 1820 and 1890. The 1890 extension incorporated parts of a mid-18th century building, including its staircase and doors. As for the name, it was once owned by the Lee family, who owned and leased a windmill nearby. During the 19th century, this was the venue for an audit dinner when tenants of the Grimsthorpe estate were summoned to pay their rents and dine on winged game and venison from the park. After turning right, this is the road that leads to Swinstead Hall, which is alternatively known as the Summer House. It's got that name because, literally, it was originally a summer house. And here's what it looks like. Of course, this is private and we can't get to it, but isn't it a magnificent building? It was designed as part of a grand residence called Swinstead House, built in 1720 by Sir John Vanbrugh. That was later taken down, and we'll see the site of it at the end. During the 19th and 20th centuries, the summer house and the old brew and bake house were used as Swinstead's village school. Today, those buildings are the only parts of Swinstead House that remain standing. Swinstead House itself was built as an enlargement to an even older house in which the Ancaster family once lived. Mind you, we've also been walking past Swinstead House without even knowing it. Some of its material was reused in some of the local houses. Swinstead's modest little village hall greets us now. This is a charitable community facility available to the public or for community-related recreational activities. It's available to hire all year round for things like wedding receptions, anniversaries, birthday parties, the usual run-of-the-mill stuff. The hall's bar is open to the public on Thursday, Friday and Saturday evenings, and its opening time varies with the seasons. The hall also has a pool table, a dartboard and various other games available. Alright, let's get a card on this notice board, and that'll be Swinstead in the books. I can actually put this one inside because there's a gap at the bottom. These old wooden boards sometimes sort of, they bow out a little bit sometimes, don't they, when they get, the wood sort of warps. Leaves a space at the bottom. So at least that's one card that's not going to fall off anytime soon. Right, we've got one last landmark to see, although it's not really visible. You'll see what I mean in a minute. And lastly, we have the site of Swinstead House, where Vanborough's big mansion once stood. The main building was used as a dower house by the Dukes of Ancaster. Although there's nothing much to see now, there does exist an engraving of the house before it was enlarged by Vanbrugh. It's dated 1707. It's not known for sure when Swinstead House was demolished. It was definitely still here in 1830 because it's shown on a map of the estate at that time. However, by 1842 it had gone, so we can at least narrow it down to a 12-year span. As we leave the village, glance right and you'll see the property that houses the Pigeon Loft. That's a private bar. You can only attend it through invitation or prior booking according to Google. So I'll leave all you Swinsteaders with a question. Have you ever been to the Pigeon Loft? Let me know in the comments what it was like. That will do us for Swinstead. There'll be much more on Grimsthorpe Castle and the Dukes of Ancaster as we continue through South Kesteven, but tomorrow we're going to wrap up this run with a parish that sports two tiny hamlets. They both begin with the letter C, and splitting the two is the East Coast Main Line. See you there, everyone. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.